Hey all, Siege here, and today's video will continue my devil in the details overarching lore theory, with this segment reinforcing the concept I tried to convey in the last video, only on a bit broader scale, and I think in large part, the focus of this video is to attempt to reframe how we think about the man on the wall altogether. Well, at least pertaining to this theory. Please consider checking out the first two installments in the series, as the situations presented in the video draw heavily from those, and if you haven't seen them, you're going to be completely in the dark on this one. Also, tons of spoilers are inbound, so if you're not caught up with the quest in Warframe, check those out and come back afterwards. So with that out of the way, rather than look at who the man on the wall influences directly, this time I want to look at who the Void has some type of influence over concerning the greater Warframe universe, because the thought process I want you to at least consider is that the man on the wall may in fact be the personification of a cosmic consciousness that some who worship him, her, it, may have no clue that they are in fact already elevating as a god, just without a name. First, let's look at the Grineer and what I feel is kind of the de facto leadership amongst the group. Given how splintered this group appears to be, the only true leaders, or leader now, at least from what we currently know, is the lone remaining Grineer Queen, with characters like Vor and Tal Regor being officers within the larger Grineer army. From the information found during the War Within, we realize that at least one of the queens has experience with Kuva and continuity, and now that we have Kuva Liches, we can actively see how aspects of the Void have made their way into the Grineer hierarchy. Not to mention, the Kuva Fortress shows their group to be intimately connected with Kuva accumulation and production, and considering the properties the substance has, and its obvious origins from the Void, it's not hard to make a connection between Kuva, called the Old Blood, and the wine and bread symbolically served at Christian religious services, the blood and body of Christ as it's commonly known. In this regard, Jesus is considered the way to eternal life, so a parallel exists here where Kuva literally is the blood that gives everlasting life, with continuity being the evidence of that. This also can be considered another Bloodborne reference, as the power of the Old Blood in that game, while having incredible healing properties, is also a corrupting agent that turns men into beasts, analogous to how Teshin describes Kuva during the War Within.
Others believe it to be a poison, a corrupting oil that brings madness and evil.
As well as Requiem words being used to sever the continuity in Kuva Liches, harkening back yet again to Bloodborne's Carol runes. We also know that Kuva has an innate connection to the sentience, revealed in the Saya's Vigil quest, where the Unum, another spectral consciousness, asked her followers within Cetus to feed her temple Kuva, as it's known, to the plants and animals in the general vicinity to form a connection with a sentient hiding amongst the plains of Eidolon, in order to uncover its whereabouts. This sentient in particular learns that the Kuva can restore its ability to replicate, showing again the healing properties it possesses. It is interesting that this entity, the assumed consciousness of the Unum Tower, is said to have prophetic powers, and is sought out amongst the most influential in the system for this gift, but would only speak to those she deemed quote-unquote worthy, something I alluded to in the previous video as a trait of the man on the wall. And what might be even more interesting is the Unum's other name, that being the Wall. According to the Unum fragment, Ostrons believes she is the pin center of the universe, listening to the infinite poetry of cause and effect. Some visitors to her chamber leave bitterly disappointed, others elated, others furious. But one thing is certain: the information she imparts changes the person who receives it. And that sounds awfully familiar if you ask me. Moving on though, we can take a look more deeply at the Corpus, known in game as a merchant cult that claim to be descendants of the Orokin. The most notable aspect of the Corpus is that even though money and power are said to be their stated desires, they have an almost cult-like love of the Void itself, considering it to be the driving force behind their successes. One only needs to look at how they refer to the Void, telling their followers to trust in the Void, that richness and power comes for those who give unto it, and even going as far as to claim that bathing in the Void and being a devout follower will lead to prosperity. To me, this sounds more like the worship of a deity than just a vague allegiance to outer space. And it could give credence to how the Corpus were able to continue their rise of power within the Sol system even after Parvis Granum was supposedly lost. We know Alad V has already had intimate dealings with the sentients, and I think it's possible he was forced into this alliance specifically due to the fact that he doesn't appear to share the same ideals as Nefanyo and other more prominent Corpus board members. Perhaps his faith, or lack thereof, isn't something the void appreciates. I think this could be significant when speaking about Parvos Granum, as he too was more interested in relying on himself to succeed, as he does not worship the void as the other members of the Corpus leadership do, revealed in his own tenets. Granum worked very hard for his position in the universe, whereas the Corpus board are said to have become fat and lazy. And yet, they seem to have achieved a level of wealth and power on par with, or even potentially greater than Granum, outliving even the Orokin in the end. We know the Orokin have a substantial tie to the void. Is this why they decided to attempt to destroy him and his work shortly after he developed the Spectre particles, becoming a creator of sorts and potentially challenging the will of the void? In Leviticus chapter 26, verse 1 of the Bible, it states, "Ye shall make you no idols, nor graven image, neither rear you up a standing image, neither shall ye set up any image of stone in your land to bow unto it, for I am the Lord your God." Had Parvos come dangerously close to creating or becoming a false idol, as many in the Corpus followed his teachings religiously and revered him as one might a god or prophet? It's fascinating that whereas the Orokin, Corpus, and even Grineer utilize the void as a pathway to all kinds of things many consider to be unnatural, Parvos seems to have the innate gift to be able to access the void in an artificial manner, being able to mimic and even match the powers and behaviors of a Tenno-controlled Warframe, specifically when his specters were able to fend off actual Warframes, with the Zorus weapon we are given being able to trap what looks to be void energy in a kind of pocket dimension to be utilized by those specters, somewhat like the space the Granum void seems to occupy. A space within the void, trapped in time, not necessarily subject to its will without specific knowledge of how to access it. It's even known as Granum's void, or his dimension when you think about it. Consider too that the way into this area is an artificial hand, signifying Granum's golden hand, but curiously similar to the hand Albert and Trotty first watched reach for him. The fingers of this encounter still being utilized for the function of our railjacks. It's entirely possible he has found a way to tap into the void without requiring a deal with the devil for power, so to speak. And it would lend itself to the change in the mindset of the Corpus once Granum was gone. A believe in yourself type of attitude that was replaced with a faith in the void and a lack of work ethic that at one point was the backbone of Corpus idealism, with tenets such as fortune despise the idle man, contentment is idleness, and beware the idle man who would lull you back into idleness. This last one is almost specifically relevant as far as this overall theory is concerned. The religion of the void becoming the path to profit, replacing the do-it-yourself ideal Parvos had decreed during the formation of the Corpus. Regarding the infested, it's tough to gauge exactly when they were created in reference to the first time the Orokin made contact with the void to see if a connection exists there, but from the context I was able to discern, it does appear that they came after, and it's interesting how potent the infestation is, seemingly unlike anything else in the system, with its own sentience in Helminth, as well as whatever had taken over the mind of the Jordas Cephalon. Not to mention that the infestation is most powerful on Deimos through what's known as the Grey Strain, the heart of Deimos being the link between worlds and the wellspring of the Tenno's power also residing right there. Again though, because I can't determine which came first for certain, these could just be coincidences. But finally, we have the sentience. Although at first believed to be a true alien race, we come to find out they were machines sent to the Tau, a new solar system, to begin terraforming so that the Orokin would be able to escape this system and start again, with most of this universe being ravaged by years of Orokin exploitation and experimentation. They were, however, altered by the void and thus became sentient. It's almost too obvious, but is it that hard to believe that the void purposely gifted that ability to these machines? It's either that or a happy coincidence that they started to think for themselves without being created with the intention of having that ability. Creating AI is exceptionally difficult, and for it to be just stumbled upon during a trip through the void space to another solar system seems rather suspect to me. AI typically doesn't just happen to non-sentient beings without intent. So at this point, I think you can start to see the bigger picture I'm trying to put forth to you, that it's very possible the void has and is pulling the strings regarding the events in Warframe that have led to this point in the game. And as I stated in my last video, I believe the Man on the Wall to be the personification of that void that interacts with those it feels are worthy of its time. But why, you might ask? Why would the Man on the Wall do all this? And to that I would have to say, it's possible to find that exact reason within the intentions of the sentience. The war going on in-game is happening for a reason, although it's been so long since it began that most don't know or remember. The Sentients knew what the intentions of the Orokin were for the Tau system, and quite simply didn't want that to happen. But until their transformation, would not have even had the capacity to care about such things. They were machines after all. They had to be given consciousness to want to fight back, potentially even saddled with the loss of replication in order to reinforce the desire to get revenge on the Orokin. Consider too that every other entity within the Sol system instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment. But humans, and specifically the Orokin, do not. They move to an area and multiply until every natural resource is consumed, and the only way they can survive is to spread to another area. There's another organism that follows the same pattern. Do you know what that is? A virus. Maybe the man on the wall or the void considers the Orokin a disease and seeks to eradicate it from existence. Given its documented interactions with Albrecht and Trotty, as well as years of void interactions overall, it would have access to what the true intentions of the Orokin were, and the concept of the void infiltrating this world and using its available resources, the Tenno, the Sentients, Nata, and even Ballast, to bring the Orokin's way of life to an end sounds like a mirror of what the Orokin had planned for the Tau, and had already done to this solar system. Utilize the existing resources to further their goal. In this regard, it's possible to view the man on the wall not necessarily as an enemy, with its intentions not specifically being pure, but justified in many ways. And I think it's important to remember, things have changed. Aside from Ballast, or whoever this person is completely, Nihil, which many of us have stored somewhere on our ship with the curious tap prompt on his container, and let me add, it's even weirder when you look at other prompt text around the orbiter that every other one describes the thing you access when selecting the prompt versus this one just saying tap of all words. And finally, the Entrati, who are the literal keepers of the connection of the void. There are no other Orokin. But that doesn't mean things just end. And with newfound worship may come newfound allegiance. As I stated earlier, the Corpus have almost completely altered their original ideology to a devout worship of the void, and by doing this have been able to hold their power and in many ways become even more powerful with less work. The people of Cetus revere the Unum as a god, also derived from the void, with this god providing for them, offering its own living flesh as sustenance. And remembering that the man on the wall can easily be the woman in the wall if the character is female, allows for at least a very tenable connection to be plausible here. One can even see how it offered the Sentients the ability to fight back against its creators in an effort to keep them from destroying more of the universe for their own personal gain. And considering it's widely believed that the Tenno were the ones that killed the Orokin emperors, where it appeared no one else could, or this story being an example of how difficult this task actually was, it's most likely what we owe him for.
You mad at me, kiddo? Did you forget? You owe me. You owe me.
Our powers and the ability to fight back against an oppressive force. It's not at all different from how many view God today, or at least how they want to look at God, a being that has the ability to manipulate this reality in order to fulfill an individual's needs, as if giving us life wasn't good enough. Praying for a job, praying for a winning lottery ticket, even praying for the health of a loved one are all personal deals made under the impression this entity will essentially change fate for them. Even though, in the same breath, most also believe in free will, never considering in order to change that fate, it will most assuredly require changing the fate of someone else, most likely in a way they didn't necessarily intend. Well, in my opinion, and based on a fair amount of strong evidence, the man on the wall is a god with intention and influences pieces on the board it has in front of it in order to achieve its goals, but can be helpful and even benevolent if its own purposes are served. And I think in the next video, I'm going to tie all this up and explain why I think he has taken to the idea of a war between the Tenno and Nata. I had thought I could finish this series this week, but alas, my research just keeps bringing up new information I want to share. In the end, it's just more content though, right? With that being said, I hope you enjoyed part 3 and are excited for the next and most likely last part of the series. But what do you think? Is this all just a coincidence? Or is it possible everything is connected? I'll be curious to hear what your thoughts are. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.